In January 2020, say an Uber ride from New York City's John F. Kennedy Airport to Midtown Manhattan costs about $50. Today, based on the average price rise of Uber rides, that same trip could be $75, about a 50% jump. You may have noticed this too. According to data from Rakuten Intelligence, the average Uber and Lyft fare in the US rose month to month from February through July, breaking records each time. In July 2021, consumers paid over 50% more per ride compared with January 2020.
All these customers are complaining that they are actually paying more for their rides.
The biggest factor that's driving prices up has to do with the pandemic. But prices were slowly beginning to rise even before the pandemic.
To all the viewers seeing this, don't expect dirt cheap prices the way that we had before the pandemic.
Here's why your Uber and Lyft rides are going through the roof, and why they might not ever come all the way back down to where they once were.
Ride prices are higher for customers right now, especially during the pandemic, because there is that shortage of drivers and increased demand.
Harry Campbell, an Uber and Lyft driver, runs a popular blog called Rideshare Guy.
Drivers, like many others, had a huge impact by the pandemic. And I think really what we saw at the start was demand for ride hail really just fell off the cliff.
In early 2020, bookings for Uber rides declined 75% as Americans hunkered down for the pandemic. As states have opened back up, the demand for rides has returned faster than the supply of drivers, resulting in price hikes in many cities across the US. Experts say that prices are taking a while to return to normal for a few reasons.
Yeah, I think the number one factor why drivers haven't come back to Uber and Lyft and why we're seeing this shortage on the supply side still to this day is because of unemployment insurance.
Some states are still paying unemployment benefits, but in states that have stopped benefits, Uber and Lyft are seeing drivers return and prices go down.
Uber has said that they've seen prices come down in places like Miami, Houston, and Atlanta. Whereas big cities like New York, San Francisco, and LA, prices are still high there because drivers haven't returned.
Uber said 90% of the 90,000 inactive drivers they surveyed in June indicated they plan to return by September, when unemployment benefits expire in most states. Another factor keeping prices up? Rideshare companies aren't just competing for drivers amongst themselves. They're also competing with food delivery services, which drivers say offer safer work conditions.
Actually, traditionally, driving for hire has always been a pretty dangerous job. You really don't know who's getting into your car at all times. I mean, I think the CDC recommendation was to stay 6 feet away from people. And as soon as someone gets into your car, they're breaking that rule. So a lot of gig workers have switched over to delivery services and found that they liked it.
Riders, on the other hand, are back on the road in droves. As rider demand has increased, both Uber and Lyft increased driver bonuses earlier this year to attract more drivers back to the platform. In April, Uber announced it was allocating $250 million in an effort to boost driver availability. Lyft spent $572 million on driver incentives through the second quarter of 2021. For now, these incentives seem to be working. According to Lyft, more drivers are coming back to the platform in recent months. As drivers return to the roads, Uber and Lyft hope that prices will stabilize, but they'll probably never be as cheap as they typically were in the last decade. There are a few reasons for this. For one, Uber and Lyft had begun phasing out discounts to riders even before the pandemic.
What started happening before the pandemic is that pressure started to build from investors. Investors started saying, you have to have a sustainable model to future profits.
Uber and Lyft have been using a subsidy model since the very beginning. And that model is fairly simple. Startups raise venture capital and use those funds to attract customers with deep discounts. These subsidies could come in many forms, from low shipping rates for e-commerce sites to coupons for free food delivery. For ride-hailing companies like Uber and Lyft, subsidies have involved attracting riders with big discounts and then incentivizing drivers to provide those rides. But in recent years, the companies have begun phasing out those rider discounts.
They are not profitable companies. They lose money nearly every year. We don't know when they will turn a net profit.
For now, rideshare companies are still offering drivers incentives as a way of making driving more attractive for the long haul, given the ongoing challenges. However, Uber said that their driver numbers have increased to a point where they'll be pulling back on driver incentives moving forward. The company's near-term challenge is keeping drivers after that.
the bonus pay every single week might be 30% of a driver's pay. So you could imagine that if they completely got rid of these bonuses one day and drivers saw their pay cut by 30%, you'd have a huge exodus of drivers at a time where the companies are already struggling to match supply and match demand.
So companies are thinking of new ways to make driving more attractive.
One of the things that Uber began doing is that it started offering free online language classes for drivers. The company says, a lot of their drivers are immigrants. English is not their first language. So this could be a tool that they could use to move up the ladder and develop new skills.
Also adding to the cost of rides, when regulatory changes like Prop 22 went into effect in late 2020, companies shifted some of the financial burden to customers.
If consumers want better benefits for drivers, then we should also be willing to pay slightly more.
Both Uber and Lyft are focusing more on long-term profits. Analysts say consumers should expect to pay more per ride compared to the discounted rates before the pandemic.
I think that they probably weren't paying, the full cost of the fare in a lot of these situations and kind of getting a good deal. Riders may have to pay a little bit more for their rides and they may not like it, but hopefully they'll find solace in the fact that, drivers, are getting, part of that ride.
For consumers, rideshare prices probably will not stay at their current heights. However, you probably won't see those low subsidized prices again anytime soon.